Hey guys, welcome back. So tonight I brought home another Generac. This one is an XG10000e, and it's very similar to that older one I did a video on about a month ago, the 10000 EXL. The EXL was about 24 years old. This one's quite a bit newer, and there is only about 56 hours on the clock. So fairly young. It was listed for parts only. With that said, the seller only mentioned that it probably needs a new carburetor to run, and there was some chewed wires. And I've already given this a look, kind of a once over. I haven't found any chewed wires, so I'm not sure if that's going to be a problem or not. Fuel tank looks pretty good. Some slight surface rust, but nothing that's going to cause a run problem. And overall, this machine looks pretty complete and in good condition. I did check the oil. Oil looks clean and full. And this one, unfortunately, is a electric start only. There is no recoil, and the battery's getting a bit low. So what I want to do is get that battery off of there and get it charging while we're dealing with the carburetor. And the carburetor, unfortunately, it's not very accessible. It's way up here on top of the engine. And the only way to get to it really is to remove this side panel and get the tank out of there. So it'll give you access to that carburetor. So I'm gonna get you set up on a stand. We'll get that battery out and get the tank out and then see what we're dealing with inside of that carb. There's hope. Battery's sitting at 12.25 volts. So this has a chance of coming back. Most likely this is the original battery. Be nice if there was a date code on it, but I do not see any evidence of a date. Okay, and before sliding this out, I got to get this hose out of the way. This is a ventless gas cap, and instead, this is vented through this tube, which runs down to the airbox. Okay. So that came out really easy. There is a lip here. I would actually expect there to be like a rubber grommet or rubber bushing of some sort here. Not sure, but having it that loose, once you fill this up with gas and splash around, it's gonna come out the side. So we might need to get a new one of those. I was gonna disconnect this hose from the airbox, but I can see somebody already did. We got some zip ties here and it just goes down to the ground. So, that's not correct. Not the end of the world, generator will run like that, but there should be somewhere on that airbox where this belongs. So when we take that apart, we'll just take note of where that is. Almost forgot. Gotta disconnect the fuel line. Now, with the fuel valve off, this pushes through. And you don't want to force it, but it should come out. And if I disconnect this one right here, that's the one going to the fuel tank, that should completely free up this tank to come out. pretty clean. Never taken one of these apart before. A little bit different. Not quite sure what the purpose of that is. It looks like it's, if I had to guess, again, it looks like it might be somehow getting heat off of the exhaust and putting it in there. But doesn't make a very good connection, so I don't know if that is factory or not. Yikes. That's where the fuel tank vent should be, right there. So I've removed, the 2 bolts holding the airbox onto the carb and these 2 holding it onto the bracket. With that said, it seems like there's something still holding it on, so I gotta take a closer look before exerting too much force. I don't want to break this. Removing that bracket may not have been the best idea. I think there is some governor linkage on there. But if you look way in, that screw, I think, is attached to the airbox from the bottom. Yeah, that's gonna be a little tricky, but let me see if I can get that out. Okay, I was able to get the bolt out. Sorry, I shut the camera off for that. It was kind of putting up a bit of a fight, but we are free now, I think. You can see here, there's a lot of stuff here in front of that bolt. So, not really sure how you're supposed to torque that properly when putting it back together. The top ones were easy. Bottom ones, different story. So might have to read up on that a bit when putting it back together. I don't want to mess it up. But we're in. So I know you can't see what I'm doing over here, but this has a Briggs style connector. It just kind of, it's an arm that just locks onto the choke lever. Unfortunately, it's really on there. And it's plastic. There we go. Okay, so I may have gone about this the wrong way. I don't think this carburetor is going to slide out enough before it hits this governor arm. You know, these studs are just too long. So what I decided to do instead, which I already started to do, was I just double nutted the stud. I'm going to turn this out and do the same over here, and then that should allow the carburetor to come right out. kind of glossed over something earlier. There's 4 bolts that hold this carburetor to the intake manifold, and the 2 bolts on the bottom were a problem. When I finally got the screwdriver on here and went to crack it free, it just spun right out. It was already loose. And this one, I didn't really notice it until I went to go pull things out. This screw was basically hanging out like that, completely disengaged from any threads, obviously not doing anything useful as far as holding this carb on. So having 2 out of the 4 bolts loose or falling out would have created a huge vacuum leak between the carb and the intake manifold. And all else being good, that would have caused a run condition where it wouldn't start. So I kind of have a feeling that this carburetor might be in good shape based on what I found with these 2 bolts. Okay, well, I was wrong about the carb. It's kind of a mess. Well, that jet's clear. It's letting a little through, but this one is clogged a bit. Those are the motion tubes, and lastly, I got to get this pin out. It's kind of fighting me a bit. That needle is kind of cemented in there. Oh, there we go. I think that's it. So I'm just going to wipe off this crusty stuff and put it in the ultrasonic for a bit and see if we can't get this thing looking like new. Okay, battery's been charging for about a day. Just gonna test it real quick. I think it did take a charge. Before it was at 12.25. Yeah, and now it's at 13.1, so perfect. The battery is good. And next, before I put the carburetor together, I want to test the fuel shutoff solenoid. So I've hooked up some alligator clips. I'm going to do negative to white and positive to green. And this should go in. So fuel solenoid is good. And then lastly, the carburetor's all done. Cleaned up pretty well. There is some corrosion on the aluminum, but there's nothing that can be done about that. But all the chunks are gone. And this thing is ready to be reassembled. Done. Let's get this thing back on. All right, I was just double checking the orientation of this arm, and when I took it off, I think it was like this. But when you do that, it actually hits against this idle set screw. It just doesn't seem right. It's way too close. I double checked the diagram online, and they have it drawn more like this. So I tend to believe that that's more correct. Also, this governor arm spring, I believe, was hooked in up here. Could be wrong about that, but that also doesn't seem right. Usually these springs hook in a lot closer to where the governor arm shaft is, and there's a cutout right there for it. So I'm going to put it on like this with this spring right in that hole. Right or wrong? I think it's right. All right, so I was about to start reconnecting everything, and I'm noticing multiple issues here. First off, the throttle. This is throttle plates open, throttle plate closed, right? And every time I'd go to bolt it on, I'd run into a problem where that throttle would no longer move at all. Stuck. And what's happening is that on the other side of this ball, there's a nut which holds that on. It's the nut that's hitting the intake manifold physically. So that was kind of the first clue that something was wrong. The second clue is that to go full throttle, this has to go up, and this governor arm goes this way. To go throttle plate closed or low speed, you close the throttle plate and the governor pulls back. But if I put this arm on, governor's in slow speed and I'm a mile away. If I turn the governor to what's supposed to be throttle plate open, it still is a little bit short. And it has no chance of opening that throttle, because when you open the throttle, actually, it pulls a little bit further away. So this ball is installed completely wrong. The good news is that there's no way this generator could have been doing anything other than idling like this. There's just not enough length in this rod to even allow the throttle plate to open. So good news is the engine probably didn't over rev. The bad news is whoever installed this probably got quite annoyed because it either A, wouldn't start, or B, if it did start, it would run so slow it wouldn't make power. And then it probably sat and the fuel went bad. That's my theory anyway. So let me get this situation corrected and we'll continue. Now that the fuel is theoretically taken care of, the fuel system, I want to look over this electrical system, make sure there's no surprises lurking. So overall, the wire color looks pretty good. None of the stator ropes are burned. I do see some spots that look a little bit dark. I see more like that down here. But with that said, the ropes show no sign of overheating. So I think the stator's in good shape. The rotor also looks good. There's no terminals down here to test the resistance in that stator, so I'm going to try to get a reading out of the outlets. I do not know what a healthy reading is for the stator on this. Most generators, I would say anywhere between like 0.1 and 0.5 is usually healthy. 0.3 is good. Now I'll try the other leg. And 0.3 ohms on the other leg. So that's good. They're both consistent. Without knowing the readings, if you compare the two, they should be about the same. And in this case, they are. So I'm pretty certain the stator is in good shape. Lastly, I do want to pop this panel off real quick. I've not found any mouse damage, so if there's nothing behind here, which I don't expect there to be, then I think we're all set as far as the electrical goes. Everything looks pretty clean in here. No signs of a critter, no signs of someone hacking together a bunch of wires, although I'm not sure about these connectors, these yellow connectors, if those are factory or not, but everything looks pretty clean. I think we're good. Not sure what this is, but it's loose. So I'm going to tighten that down, and I think we'll be ready for contact. I'm going to do two quick tests. First one, I'm going to spray a little bit of carb cleaner, aka starting fluid, in the carburetor. And I'm going to try starting it. That if it starts, that'll tell me I have spark, compression, timing, and maybe we'll see that light turn on. If that goes well, the engine sounds good, I'll actually put some gas in that fuel line and try running it a bit longer on the carburetor and see what we get. Okay, that sounded really good. The engine was slow, but that is because I turned the governor spring down. So I'm gonna put gas in it now and then restart it and adjust that governor speed up. Looks like it flooded over a little bit. So I'm gonna try to start it with the choke off and see if we can get anywhere. Okay, not sure what to think about it. GFI will not reset. The one on the left. So that's an issue. Obviously it's surging. It wasn't like that though when it first started, so I might pop that air box back on with the filter and just try it one more time, see if that helps. Okay, not bad. The air filter helped a bit. Still hunting, but better. So I don't know necessarily the direction I want to go. I mean, the carburetor after cleaning was pretty spotless, so I'm not sure there's much else I can do to improve that situation. But one of the things I was thinking is that the governor, comes out right there. That's the governor shaft and attaches to the governor arm. And there's a spring attached to that governor arm. There's actually 4 holes where that spring could go. Now, as we know, someone's been messing with all the linkages in here and they had it all wrong. So I just left that spring where it was on the governor arm. Maybe that's in the wrong spot. And the further out on the arm you come, the more sensitive it is. And in theory, that's good, but if you come too far out, it'll get oversensitive and start surging for that reason alone. So maybe that's what's going on. So I will move that spring a little bit closer. As far as the power output, we have power output on both legs. I tested with the meter here on both legs and it was at 122, 123. This GFCI would not reset, but the light was on, so it was getting power. So we definitely need a new one of those. And lastly, this is probably the most annoying thing. This isn't coming out very far. So when you try to move it around, you get about 10 feet, this pops in and the handle just collapses. So definitely need to replace that. But overall, pretty good. The engine sounds good. Stator makes power, so can't ask for too much more than that. So let me get this back to the garage and we'll figure out where to go from there. Get the airbox off again. I'm going to remove this plate. Before I do that, I'm just going to take the tension off the governor spring. And I've already drawn a line here to kind of indicate where it's set right now. Now when I put it back together, I am going to back it off a bit, but I'll use that as a guide. These are the holes I was talking about. So the spring is on the second to last hole coming out. And the further you go, the more sensitive the response is on the throttle. And in theory, like I said before, that's great, but the further out you go, you eventually hit a point where it starts hunting and surging, especially at no load. So I don't know where this goes. I did check online at the parts diagram, and when you zoom into this level, it's just too blurry. But from what it looks like to me is that this spring, like if you were to take these 4 holes and divide it in the middle, looks like the spring is more on this side. So I'm going to move it over 1 hole and try it. And, if it doesn't work too well, we can always move it 1 more. Okay, I got you focused in on the carburetor and the linkage, so you can kind of see what's going on once we get it started, as well as you can see the choke. So moving that spring really didn't make much of a difference. It still surges. You know, when the engine's cold, it surges more. When it warms up, you can turn the choke off, but it's still hunting. And then if you put a load on it, just a 1500 watt load, the surge comes back and it's pretty bad. So it's a carb issue. I'm gonna try cleaning this one more time, but have a feeling that I might end up getting a new carb for this. Gonna give this carb one last chance. I did take it apart again, cleaned it again in the ultrasonic. First time it probably was in there for 15 minutes. This time I kept it in there for about half an hour. Also ran through all the holes with torch tip cleaners and wire bristle, and used carb cleaner this time. So if this doesn't do it, I'm buying a new carb. That is a noticeable improvement. It is running without surging and with the choke off at no load. With a load on it, it is starting to surge a bit. I'm gonna grab another heater and just try it at a 3000 watt load and see what it does. I was shocked at how well this ran. I didn't give it much hope. I thought I was going to buy a new one of these and was really trying to avoid it. It's 150 bucks just for the carb, and you know, of course there's no guarantee that it is the carb, but as it turns out it was. I didn't really do a whole lot different when I cleaned it the second time, and I didn't film it because you kind of saw what I did the first time. I think the biggest thing is that The first time, I only showed it going through one cycle of the ultrasonic. I actually ran it a few cycles through there. This time I ran it a lot more. And I put a lot more degreaser in there. I also used carb cleaner and just sprayed it pretty much through everything. And lastly, on the throttle side, above the plate, there's some small holes. And I used a small wire from a bristle brush and just poked it through all those holes. And it did feel like there were some that were clogged potentially. So not sure what it was, but I'm glad it is working now. It runs great when idling and as well as under load. Under 3,000 watt load, the engine speed does not change at all. It doesn't miss a beat. So very impressed with that. It's only going to run better once the airbox is on, because it'll be pulling some heat off of the exhaust, putting a little more drag, which means a little more fuel is going to go into the engine. So I'm going to get the airbox back on, get the fuel tank back on, get a parts order in. This thing does need a few miscellaneous parts like the outlet and a new locking tab at a minimum. So get that stuff on order and then we can finish this thing up. Found the part number for this GFCI outlet, and it is available. Unfortunately, it was listed at 75 bucks, and that doesn't include tax and shipping. So instead, made an executive decision, went down to the hardware store, got a GFCI outlet for 20 bucks. So that's what I'm going to use. So I did run into a bit of a problem. I ended up moving the good outlet from this spot, and I'm going to put it in the spot where the bad one was. And the reason for that is that I need to double up these wires on the ground and the neutral. And the neutral worked fine, but on the ground screw just doesn't come out enough to get two of these terminals on there. So I'll use this one, the new one, on the outside, where it's only going to have one of each wire going to it, which should be fine. All right, that does it. I'm not sure I'd recommend doing this. I mean, I got it to fit, but the dimensions were ever so slightly different, so it was a little tough to get it in here. And to double up the wires at the terminals really wasn't an option, which is why I had to flip-flop these. But I think this will work just fine in the end. The new rollover valve came in, so I'm going to give it a try. This one actually feels like this material is quite a bit more rubbery, whereas the other one felt like hard plastic, so maybe this will fit a little better. Oh yeah. Yeah, that's a much tighter fit. It doesn't wobble at all. So I haven't really shown you the problem with this button here. That button's the only thing that keeps this handle locked. And when pulling this like on a smooth surface like this, it actually works pretty well. But the second you hit grass, you get more resistance, and you can't get very far before that button just goes like that. So it's kind of annoying, to say the least. And I looked on Generac's website. This button's not available, which is kind of surprising because almost every part for this generator is available, but not the button. And they still sell this generator, but not the button. So our options are a little bit limited there. I thought this was a cap, and I started prying it on this side and actually broke it. That's actually a plastic bushing in here, which helps this handle move smoothly. So I did end up buying a new bushing for that. So at a minimum, I'm going to replace the bushing on this side. And the reason why I was prying that off is because I was looking at using something like a hitch pin to put in there to hold this thing still. Unfortunately, the bushing is fairly wide. It's about this wide, and then there's another metal bushing here. So if I do a hitch pin, it's going to have to be somewhere closer to the middle. So I do want to get this off, replace the bushing, and just try to figure out where to drill. And this will have to do. Not exactly ideal, but it does the job. It's pretty cold out here today. It's about 18 degrees, and got a bunch of heaters I want to load test this with. So, but before I do that, I'm going to start it, let it warm up a bit, and I want to make sure those outlets are functioning properly. I had to remove a lot more wires than I thought, probably about 12 in total. So hopefully it's all connected back up properly. And assuming that it is, I will load test it with about 5,000 watts and see how it does. Overall, not too bad. It does take a few minutes before I can turn that choke completely off, but you know, that's somewhat to be expected. It's pretty cold out today. You know, it handles the load quite well. I actually turned them all on full, so at one point it was a 6,000 watt load, and it didn't skip a beat. It runs very well under load. When under no load, it floats a bit, it hunts a bit, but you know, that's somewhat normal. You get a big engine with pretty much no load on it, it's gonna do that a bit. So I think I'm splitting hairs a bit. This thing runs well, makes good power. I think I'm done. Hope this video helps someone. Thanks for watching.